Welcome to the Talk Like a Leader podcast, where we explore the mindset, skill set, and habit set of leadership communication. Using these tips, techniques, and tactics, you'll be able to talk like a leader to build better relationships and get more done. Your host is Guy Harris, who has more than 20 years of combined professional and military experience in consulting, coaching, and training in areas like team and interaction dynamics, communication strategies and tactics, as well as emotional intelligence. Take it away, Guy.
Hi, this is Guy Harris. Welcome to Talk Like a Leader. We're continuing the conversation with Carl Smith about the coaching mindset and one, what coaches need to do to get out of their own way, and two, what coaches can do to adapt to people who might have a style or approach different from them. This week, we're going to talk about the C perspective or the cautious style perspective using the DISC model as a framework. This will be people who have a reserved, task-oriented perspective. And like we've done in other episodes in this series, we're going to talk a bit about the person who has cautious traits, who's sitting in the coaching seat, meaning the person who has to deliver the coaching or the person who is acting as the coach. We're also going to talk about what someone who has to coach people with C traits might need to think about if they want to invite a person with C traits into the conversation. So I'll start with the C perspective, because that's my primary trait, and talk about what I do that gets in my own way as a person with cautious traits. The single biggest thing I think that I struggle with is too much data and too much details, because I am such a fan of data and details, and I get hung up in nuance and subtlety and all that kind of stuff, that if I'm not careful when I'm coaching a person, particularly a person who doesn't have a lot of C traits, I can lose them in all that data and detail. I can miss the point because there's so much data around the sides. It's kind of the same end point that Carl talked about last time we were together, when he talked about a person with supportive traits being the coach, being so gentle and so indirect that the point gets lost. That for a different reason, I think people with C traits in the coaching seat can have the point lost, is that we can obscure the main point with so many points that the main point is lost. It's just a sea of data and information, and in an effort to clarify and explain, it can just frankly become too much. And so the thing from speaking to a person who has C traits, how you can become a better coach, is to refine your message. Make sure you're clear about one, maybe 3 points, preferably like one or two, and keep the conversation focused on the key points of the conversation rather than getting off in the weeds with all the 14 different supporting pieces of information that occur to you while you're talking about it, and fight the tendency to overwhelm people with data and facts and that kind of thing. If you can do that, then you'll probably be a better coach. And I think the second thing is sort of related to that, is to remember that in coaching, for most people, it's more relational than transactional. And so remember to make room for the relationship and work on being warm and inviting more than you are factual. And this would be the advice for people with cautious traits if you want to be a better coach. Now, Carl, sitting in the seat of a person who has to coach a person who has C traits. Now you've got a person on your team, you're trying to help them see how to improve or get better, and you need to invite them into the conversation. What have you learned that is helpful in the situation with a working person who has C traits?
So, and I'm glad you asked that, and both of us have quite a bit of this.
Right. We both do. Yeah.
Yeah. So, one of the things I think will be a good thing to remember is, in working with folks that have a lot of C tendency, and a lot of folks that I actually coach do, is to explain the why. What's the purpose? What's the objective up front? And also talk about, give some kind of structure.
Mm-hmm.
Where are we going with this? In a conversation, what are we attempting to accomplish or achieve? And then setting that precedent up front, and then having some type of flow or some type of structure that people can follow, that it makes sense, that it's logical.
So have you noticed that when you're working with a person who has a lot of cautious traits or C traits, that if you do not do that, meaning you don't lay out the structure or the flow or the expectations, that they get kind of lost
Yes.
and they're struggling so hard to figure out what the structure is that they have a hard time paying attention to you? Have you noticed that?
Yes. Not only a hard time following or tracking, can get to the point of shutdown, can get to the point of just checking out, can get to the point of devaluing what's being said.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, those are, you learn through experience, and you know, sometimes you win, sometimes you learn, right?
That's
Those are
exactly right.
those are some things I've learned the hard way in working with folks that have a lot of C tendency. You just have to really, you have to think it through. You have to be prepared. You have to, if you tend to have data, tend to have information that helps to explain what's needed or what needs to take place.
And on that same vein, kind of a corollary idea, having data and all that, and having structure, I'm thinking that occurs to me that when I'm working with another person who has C traits is to remember that they need time to think things through.
Yes.
And so it's probably not likely, or I should say it's very unlikely, that in your first conversation, they're going to absorb everything you said and just be on board with it.
Right.
In coaching people with cautious traits, it is not uncommon at all to have two conversations about the same issue. One, to give them an opportunity to hear your perspective and put the issue on the table, and then put some space between that and another conversation so they have a chance to think about it a little bit.
Yep.
If you try to push for a commitment too soon, it's highly likely you'll get some phrase like this: well, I need some time to think about it. Or you ask them, what do they think about this? And they go, well, I don't know. I hadn't thought about it yet.
Right.
How much time do you need to think about it? About 2 days. And I know that not every situation requires that. You know, some things are less serious than others. This is not a hard and fast statement. It's just remember that people with cautious traits probably need some time to think about it. And if you're going to ask for commitment right now, you may or may not get it.
Yep.
Hey, Carl, any closing thoughts you have in terms of either direction as a person who has cautious traits to be a more effective coach, or if you're coaching a person has cautious traits, what would you say is like some wrapping up thoughts there?
Yeah, I would say working with someone that has a lot of C tendencies, you have to be very careful of what you say, how you say it, but then here's what we have to be real careful of not communicating in a way that sounds critical or finding fault or
good point.
The challenge or the issue. It's working together to address things, but doing it in a way that helps to improve things. You want to improve versus criticize. And that's an area that I have to be real careful of.
And, you know, I think the way you said it is really good. And I'm thinking as you say that, it's kind of two-sided. Is that because a person with C traits probably has thought through what they've done so carefully that if you sound critical, it can be taken very personally.
Yes.
So just by the way, that's probably true for everybody. It's just a heightened sensitivity for people with C traits.
Yes.
And on the other side of that, if you're a coach who has C traits, remember that you might be hypercritical.
Yes.
Because you're so driven by excellence that even the tiniest little deviation can look like a big deal to you. And this is where you have to judge, is this a big deal? I mean, is it my personal frustration with this issue, or is it really a business critical issue? I had a whole episode on personal preference or business critical. And this is where this comes to bear, is thinking through, is it really that big a deal, or does it just annoy me? And being careful with that. So we're going to wrap this up now and say that whether you have C traits or don't have C traits, hopefully we shared something with you to think about. If you have C traits, remember to beware of data overload, beware of being hypercritical. Remember to smile and loosen up and be warm with people. Remember to focus on relationship as much as you focus on facts. And if you don't have C traits and you're coaching a person who does, remember that they focus on facts, probably in preference to relationship. Nothing we say in these 4 episodes about coaching based on the DISC style of either the coach or the person is intended to lock you in, because we're really all blends of these things. And I don't know that we've highlighted that point in previous episodes, but it is, I think, as we wrap this up, to keep in mind that probably everything we've said applies to everybody. Yes. It's just that when we've said it in a particular episode, it particularly applies to people with that trait.
Yes.
And so if you'll take the time to get the mindset right and think about how you can understand how what you do gets in your own way, or how what you do maybe triggers somebody else in a negative way, if you'll think very carefully through that and look at inviting people into the conversation, keeping the distinction between coaching and discipline very clear, you can talk like a leader. This has been the Talk Like a Leader podcast. You can listen to this show every week wherever you get your podcast. If you haven't, be sure to subscribe so you never miss an episode. I'm Guy Harris, and thanks for listening.